Bartholomew Town is brought to you in part by the University of Rhode Island Online, Navigant Credit Union, the Audubon Society of Rhode Island, Newport Film, and Half Street Group.
Bartholomew Town.
We come on today with some sad news in the world of Rhode Island politics, really the world of Rhode Island as a whole, and that is that Senate President Dominick Ruggerio has died. This following a long-term illness that has been well documented. Ruggerio himself has been open about it, and it's also been the source of discussion around political and procedural matters. You may recall that in the 2024 Democratic primary election, Ruggerio's opponent, Lenny Sio, ran on a campaign, at least in part, to say, hey, wait a second, the Senate president has been absent. He's battling illness. We wish him well, but he's not fit to serve. And this sentiment has been echoed throughout the State House and around Rhode Island politics for really, you can say at least the last 6 months, if not longer. There's been some palace intrigue of sorts with almost what you would call a coup within the Senate, a coup attempt that really bifurcated aspects of the Senate into the pro-Ruggerio segment and those who wanted to see the president step aside and somebody else take the reins of that chamber. There's obviously a lot to look at from a political standpoint. There's, of course, plenty to look at from a legacy standpoint. I myself have, gotten to know the president reasonably well. He's been on the show and certainly somebody that we've seen around the State House, but there's no question that there's been deterioration. We reported at this year's State of the State that it appeared as though Ruggerio was falling asleep at the rostrum, and it was painful to watch a human being suffer. And you know that this is an individual whose identity and really his life in so many ways, of course, his family and friends, he was open about how important that was to him. But no doubt that his role in Rhode Island politics was central to his identity, and he did not want to allow anything to separate him from that identity. And he fought through this illness while maintaining the presidency. And in many ways this year, we've had a Senate president by remote standards, so to speak, where Ruggerio has missed quite a bit of session. And we'll get into all of this coming up in just a few moments with the Boston Globe's Ed Fitzpatrick, who has been working this story for the Globe. He'll give us the rundown on all of the details there and where this goes from a procedural standpoint within the Senate. And again, of course, most importantly, probably from a human level, is the legacy of Dominick Ruggerio. Lots of statements coming in, flags ordered at half staff here in Rhode Island by Governor McKee, who says, today, I join Rhode Island in mourning the loss of Senate President Dominick Ruggerio, a great friend and true public servant who dedicated his life to lifting up the state he loves. We also have statements from Senator Jack Reed. He says, I'm deeply saddened by the passing of Senate President Ruggerio, a distinguished public servant, a champion for working people and our state. And he says, a dear friend. We have statements coming in from Sabina Matos, Lieutenant Governor Sabina Matos, who says, today we lost a man who committed his life to public service in the Rhode Island Senate. This from Speaker Shekarchi. I'm heartbroken by the news of the passing of my dear friend, Senate President Dominick Ruggerio. I had enormous respect and admiration for his dedication and leadership. Even through his illness, we communicated on a nearly daily basis about the important issues facing our state. Donnie devoted his life to the people of Rhode Island, which will always be his legacy. This is the end of an era at the State House, where Donnie was a true giant for well over 4 decades, beginning his career in the House in 1981, before moving to the Senate 4 years later. On behalf of the House of Representatives, we extend our deepest sympathies to his family and his Senate colleagues, and we will miss him greatly. Congressman Magaziner. I'm saddened by the passing of Rhode Island Senate President Dominick Ruggerio. Donnie was a champion for working people, a skilled legislator, and a true gentleman. It was an honor to work closely with him on the historic school construction initiative launched in 2018. He understood the importance of investing in the next generation, and the Senate delivered under his leadership. So those are just some of the thoughts that are coming in. There'll be plenty more, and we'll continue to cover this from a variety of angles as we move forward. Again, the Senate president was somebody who lived and breathed government and the functions of government, that which happens behind closed doors, that which happens in front of the public. And he was somebody who, again, is certainly a giant in Rhode Island political lore. No surprise, of course, not only from a procedural standpoint that flags will be at half-staff, but this truly makes sense here in Rhode Island in all senses, that here's a guy who, when you think of the State House, when you think of the bicameral institutions that make up the General Assembly, Ruggerio is a massive figure, and his presence will be there forever. You'll be able to walk through those halls under the rotunda and enter into the Senate chamber. And I guarantee if you close your eyes and you feel it, if you tap into another level of consciousness, if you just pause for a second and meditate, you'll hear Ruggerio's voice, you'll feel his presence reverberating through that building. Even after that building is long gone, in that space, you'll hear it, you'll feel it. That's the kind of life devotion to this work that the president brought, and again, through his illness, was able to continue in some capacity to do so. From Bartholomew Town, we extend our deepest condolences to his family, his friends, his colleagues, and everybody in state government who's hurting. It's been a sad thing to watch this take place. It's been sad to watch a powerful person deteriorate before our eyes. It's actually been troubling from the standpoint of this notion that he should step aside because of his deterioration, and trying to marry that with the motivation that would come from staying in a position of power to try to beat the illness that he so valiantly fought against. It's a challenging and troubling environment that you get into. There are definitely people inside the Senate chamber today who had called for his resignation or at least removal as president that in part have to be feeling, I don't want to say guilt, but a little bit of extra sadness for the fact that that situation took place to begin with. But was it the right thing? Were those the right calls? And where do we go from here? No doubt about it. Again, legacy, human being, front and center. Governmental procedures and what happens next, that's also on the table. That comes with the territory. And now to break that down for us, the Boston Globe's Ed Fitzpatrick here on Bartholomew Town. The Boston Globe's Ed Fitzpatrick has been working this story of the passing of Senate President Ruggerio and joins us here on the podcast. Ed, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on, Bill.
So there's obviously a legacy piece to all of this, a giant inside of the State House. This illness is nothing that has been kept from the public, anybody who's paying attention, but just kind of set the scene for us on, from a procedural, political, and human level, how the president's illness has really shaped much of what we think of when we think of the Senate and we think of Rhode Island politics as a whole over these last months.
Oh, you hit it right on the head there, Bill. I mean, this is a man who has shaped Rhode Island politics for going on 45 years now. He began in 1981 in the House, and then by 1985, he took office in the Senate. He's been there since then. He's been the Senate president since 2017, and has been a force in shaping the policies on everything from guns to abortion to, you name the issue. Dominick Ruggerio has had an impact on it. And as House Speaker Joe Shekarchi just said in his statement, remembering Ruggerio, it's the passing of an era. It's the end of an era at the State House. And it really is. This is a day of mourning at the State House. The governor's asked to have the flags flown at half staff, and congressmen, everybody is remembering him as a champion of the working people. He'd been with the laborers before joining the legislature, and also an advocate for the economy and businesses too. He championed some tax breaks, and he's been a major influence on everything coming out of Smith Hill for going on 45 years.
It's no doubt that he's a massive figure, and it's been difficult to watch his deterioration over these last months on it, and really more than last months. It's been an extended period here, And with that has come some members of the Senate saying, hey, wait a second, should the president continue to serve in this capacity? Should he continue to serve at all? And we almost saw the Senate split into, certainly not down the middle, but the pro-Ruggerio and the pro-change, we'll say, sort of factions. Yet everybody today feeling on a human level deep sadness and just the realities of this situation coming home to roost. But where does this go from here procedurally as far as who may be in charge of the Senate on a temporary basis and who may become president in the future?
Well, I think in the immediate short-term future here, the Senate President Pro Tempore is Hannah Gallo. So the next steps of whether the Senate meets this week and what the committees do will be up to her, I believe. But then, within a short amount of time, there certainly will be a leadership battle going on with different people trying to become the next Senate president. So that's something we'll be keeping an eye on.
As far as legacy is concerned, when we look back on what the Ruggerio doctrine might be, it's too early to necessarily establish that as a whole. But as someone who's covered Rhode Island politics for, in such great detail and for so long as you have, what would you say is his greatest takeaway when we think about the Ruggerio doctrine going into the future?
Well, I mean, he a lot of his supporters will point to the fact that he was allowing bills to come to the floor that he opposed himself, whether it was a gun bill or an abortion bill. He might vote against it when he came, but he was serving the will of the Senate in that regard. But I think the things he championed that you heard him get really excited about were like the iGaming bill, the tangible tax cut to help businesses. He opposed taxing the rich, the top 1%. That was something he feared that rich people would move to other states. One thing that he said at the outset of this legislative session was that he had always said that the assault weapons ban was something that should be decided on the federal level and not the state level. So he stood in opposition to that and stopped those bills for years. But this year he said that's no longer my opinion. He told me and the other Globe reporters when we sat down with him. And so that put that issue into play. And certainly with his passing now, that issue, depending on who emerges from the leadership battle, could go forward or not.
That's a critical change in terms of his position and something that I think a lot of his detractors had pointed to at times, and some people who were unlikely allies would point to as well, his position on assault weapons and deferring, so to speak, to the federal government. As a reporter, you get to know human beings. What's your takeaway on the human being that we've lost?
Oh, I'll miss him. I thought he was, he could fight bare knuckle fights of political battles and whatever. But I think, especially as he became Senate president later in his career, he was a gentleman, and he would answer your questions, and I think he had a lot of admirers in the Senate. He made some enemies certainly in both chambers, but. He could play politics as hard as anyone, but from a human perspective, I think he had a lot of people who really loved him.
Last question, and this is sort of something to be continued as we will watch the news. BostonGlobe.com. Click on the Rhode Island section, and you can read Ed's great work as well as the entire team over at the Globe, and also listen to the award-winning RI Report podcast that Ed hosts. New episodes every Thursday. It's a great piece of our overall infrastructure here in the news media climate in Rhode Island. But this is one of those things where you look at the internal piece of Rhode Island politics, and we who cover Rhode Island politics, or those who work in politics or in the orbit thereof, know who the Senate president is. We have gotten to know him, interviewed him, interacted with him, battled with him, whatever it is. What is this story, in your mind, to the average everyday Rhode Islander who may not pay very close attention to Rhode Island politics? What should they take away from this moment?
Well, I mean, as I said, I think Ruggerio affected just about every issue you could think of. Maybe you agreed with him or opposed him on an issue, whether it was about smoking in casinos or the assault weapons ban or the iGaming or the tangible tax cut for small businesses. He was the man who decided whether bills like that lived or died. He had an enormous influence. And left his stamp on the public policy of the state for 4 decades. So, whatever issue matters to you, his career mattered.
Ed Fitzpatrick, the Boston Globe, thanks so much for taking the time. I know you're working this story and really appreciate a few minutes.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thanks for stopping by Bartholomew Town. For more content, follow me on Instagram @Bill Bartholomew.